And I still think it's quite comical that, I'm sure that, the people that you are involved with down in your tropical world of Florida, there, bro, that people would think that you don't get to talk much in this wonderful talk show. And if they knew you and know how much that you do talk on a regular basis, they would be very shocked to find out that you have family members that can out-talk you.
Well, you know what? I think I know a topic that we brought up earlier, or at least I heard about earlier. But I think we can agree that Burrow would be able to talk about a little bit here. A little mythological standpoint of a certain particular.
Akeaka, would you do the honors and introduce the topic?
I think the topic of Bigfoot would be an interesting topic to have.
Bigfoot.
Yeah, I mean, I figure this would be a very, very diverse conversation to have, considering that me and you, Uncle Bro, have very strong belief system on this, and I think there's a particular someone in this party that we won't mention, Sis, that probably doesn't believe as much as we do.
Yeah, that's
I don't know what you're talking about.
I am a very huge cryptid follower, not just Bigfoot, but, I love following, the chupacabra or, the bat, the cave bat, or cave bats. Yeah, they're mythological. Any cave bat that you met, it's a myth. They don't exist. Don't let the world fool you. But all these different, mythological creatures and supernatural things, I mean, this is my cup of tea right here. I was super excited when we were discussing some possible points. I wanted to make sure that we get to this as soon as possible. I was waiting all night for it.
And I was avoiding it at all costs because of, you didn't notice that I hadn't broached the subject.
Well, I mean, I think it's a little bit of a nerd alert going on right now. We're going to have a little bit of nerdism going on. Don't you think?
Well, you can't say that I don't have my own share of nerdness.
I don't think on this topic, I don't think this is going to be your nerdism forte.
Yeah, Bigfoot hasn't been, but here we go again. We're on the topic that we can get Uncle Bro to really kind of put his 2 cents in. Hey, the poor guy still gets to sit there and be quiet.
Well, okay, on that behalf, seeing how I'm transitioning into this, Uncle Bro, I know you being an animate follower such as myself. What is your, point and take? What is your view? How do you see, Bigfoot as a figment of actual reality? And go.
Ooh, nice. That was a good intro, Akeaka. That was awesome. I will say this. First of all, I had an article that I wanted to share tonight with you, both of you, and it'll drive this. But before I get into the article, I wanted to answer your question. I have possibly seen Bigfoot once.
Man.
So I don't have conclusive proof. And, it's one of those things where it theoretically could have been something else. So, I'm going to keep that open. But, my own tendency is to think that was probably what I saw. And I think that's worth maybe going into. Should I talk about that, what happened that night?
Yeah, that'll be a perfect transition, your personal experience, because I got one too, so we'll take turns on this.
Okay, I was about to say, I thought I wasn't supposed to be prompted to talk here. This is the all-boys show right now.
Yeah, right.
So let me just share my experience. It was about 2 or 3 years ago, and I would drive a lonely highway wooded drive in the night on a Friday night, and this is down in Florida. And so I would drive these highway roads late at night. coming back, I would go to visit my father, who was living in the nursing home. I would go and see him, and then I would go and do some other things afterwards in the area where he lived, and then I would drive back to my home, and that was about an hour and a half drive, so about 90 miles to drive back from where my father lived to my home, and it was a lot of back Florida roads, and real pretty drive, real beautiful. And I had been, this is probably something that turns a lot of people off on the credibility of my sighting, but I had been a Bigfoot want to believe for a long time. So, growing up, I wanted it to be true and was a big fan of it. And so in some people's mind, that means that I've got a confirmation bias. I'm looking for, anything out in the wilderness unusual. I'm going to say, oh, that was Bigfoot. But I was driving home this night, and one of the things that I had is I had a camera with me that could see in infrared. And so basically it was, you could see hot objects on that camera. And so I would drive home, and I would be driving home on these Florida highways at night. And there'd be, in the off-season, Florida, this area of the Florida Panhandle is very dead. It's very, there's not a lot of traffic. There's not a lot of things going on. And you wouldn't really run into a lot of traffic. You wouldn't really run into a lot of anything. It was just this beautiful nighttime drive. And so I was coming home one night, and I had I made a habit of having the infrared camera with me when I would drive home at these Friday nights. And I would just kind of look out the infrared camera while I was driving. I would just have the camera pointing out.
Super safe. Just throwing it out there. Super safe.
Hey, let me tell my story. But so I would, I'd point the camera out there and just watch and just kind of go along. It was actually fun to do because I would slow down to a pretty slow speed, on those back roads. 45 miles an hour, 55 miles per hour would be a fairly comfortable average speed that you hit there. And anyway, so I'm coming home with the FLIR and seeing it on a regular basis. And this one night, it was a night either it was like late November, early December, and I'm coming home, and I generally would just sort of sweep the one side of the highway that was easiest for me to see with the camera while I was driving. And I was trying to be safe with it too, so your point about safety's taken. But I would come to this one state park, and it was just beautiful. I loved to see the rows of trees just, extending out indefinitely as far as the distance goes. And so I'm coming home this one night, and I had done it for probably, I had probably done this procedure for several, maybe 6 or 8 weeks, 2 or 3 months almost. And I had seen interesting things along the side of the road. Sometimes you'll see cattle. You'll be driving by, and there'll be somebody's farm, and there'll be cattle out in the field, and on the infrared, they'll just show up. There's a really bright red, orangish, yellowish, blob in the middle of your field of vision. And so I saw cattle, and I saw deer on occasion, and it was pretty fun. And, I always joked that one day I would get to see Bigfoot. But, I thought, hey, no big deal if it doesn't. But one night I'm coming back, and it's maybe, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I'm coming back on the highway, and I come to this this part of the forest, and I'm just sweeping kind of normally, and I know the exact spot where it is. I'm not going to say exactly where it is, but I know that exact spot. So I had come there and just, it was just sort of a very dark night. I don't remember if there was a moon or not, but it was a dark night, and I was just enjoying, because, you know, with the infrared you can see a lot. And I was just having fun and enjoying the evening, and then I come to a certain spot on the highway, and sure enough, on the other side of the road, you know, maybe 25, 30 feet or so. Well, I don't know, you know, maybe 30, 40 feet away. It just, you couldn't see anything because it was dark. So with your unaided eye, it was completely, you know, I couldn't see anything. But with the infrared camera pointing out there, it just looked like looked like an NFL football player standing straight up in the middle of the road, not on the road, but off the side, off the shoulder, off the berm of the road. And you know, like standing maybe like 8 or 10 feet off of the road, off on the shoulder, which was down below the level of the road. So just, you know, just kind of like from the waist up kind of thing. And so there it was, and it was just there was just a figure there. You know, I guesstimated that it was the size of a, you know, like just looked like an NFL player. You know, kind of had that sort of lean look to it, but it also had broad shoulders. And it was just standing there, and for about, I don't know, half a second, 2/3 of a second, that figure was right in the middle of my field of vision on the infrared camera. And I saw it. And it was just as plain as day and unmistakable. I mean, if you've worked with these cameras, you know, you don't mistake what you've seen here. It was definitely, you know, I thought it could be an NFL linebacker just standing out on the side of the road at 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, as I was passing with the camera and as the figure started to leave the camera's field of vision, I looked up with my eyes, you know, without the camera, with the unaided vision, and to see if I could see anything, see an outline, see whatever, and I couldn't. It was, I don't know that the moon was out or not out, but it was dark enough in that particular spot that I didn't see anything with my naked eye. So as far as I would tell, if I didn't have the infrared camera with me, I would have never even noticed anything. I would have never even seen anything. And it was just there. It was just there for, you know, like 2/3 of a second to a second. And, you know, it was in the state forest kind of area, so it wasn't in a residential area, so I don't think it was somebody standing out in their yard. You know, I mean, it could have been, it could have been somebody standing there. I don't want to say that it had to have been a Bigfoot, but it was just awfully unusual for that to happen. And so I didn't know what to do at that point. You know, I just seen something pretty interesting and spectacular, but I decided that discretion was the better part of valor. And I kept on going home and watching it, and I didn't see anything more the rest of the evening, but, you know, that was a pretty interesting situation. And, you know, it could have been a person standing out there. But to be honest with you, it didn't really seem like it, because I've seen people through that FLIR camera, and I know what the average person looks like. And this was like a bodybuilder, NFL type, you know, big, you know, the shoulders were broad, the neck was minimized. and it was out in the middle of nowhere. So, you know.
Right.
So what do you think about that?
I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, there's so many different encounter stories that I've heard over my time. I mean, I can't say I'm a paranormal expert, but I'm pretty well adept into certain things that I found. Like, I used to take quite a few of my
Mommy
friends.
giggling.
Yeah. Friends of mine used to go ghost hunting and stuff like that. Used to go for, Bigfoot hunting and so on and so forth, because if you follow Bigfoot kind of movements and patterns and stuff like that, quite a bit of activity is within the Appalachian Mountains foothills, if you will, within the Appalachian Mountain ridge, if you will. So being Pennsylvania almost at the top hold of it, we don't get a lot of activity, but you get enough for it to, pick up certain areas where you can find a good sighting, especially if you go just a little further south and a little bit further west. You can get into that area just a little bit better. And I've had, what could have been just, late night fatigue. Your mind plays tricks on you, definitely at nighttime and stuff like that. We never had any kind of infrared cameras, mainly, just store-bought little cameras that we had, and never gave up really good quality. But the one that we had, I want to say there was 3 or 4 of us. We were actually not even Bigfoot hunting. We were just ghost hunting. Just kind of going out there, seeing if we could find any kind of supernatural activity. And we were in just an old wooded area that said to have an old cabin that, caused for a lot of concern, which we never actually found the cabin itself. So we just, wandered around in the woods for a little bit, nothing too far in, but enough that we couldn't see, any kind of exit point, for the distance traveled. And at the time, it was, I think, I wanted to say closer to midnight at this point in time. So it was pretty well dark, not a lot of visual activity. We had our little flashlights that we had, and some of us had our flashlights on our phones. So minimal visual radius that we had. But we were walking into what we believed was the direction of where the cabin was supposed to be. And we're not even set up for anything. We're not prepared for anything. And we hear, noises. So being the skeptic in me, if you want to be a true paranormal expert, if you want to be a true fanatic on anything, you actually have to be a skeptic, because you have to rule out the ones that are completely preposterous. You can't just believe that everything is supernatural or everything is Bigfoot or anything like that. You got to have a little bit of skepticism to it to keep an open mind. And so when we heard these noises, cracking of sticks and rustling of bushes and stuff like that, we're like, oh, we probably got close to a pack of deer or something like that, and they just bolted off because we were making a good bit of noise just talking to each other. Being, teens and stuff like that, we were really concerned about being quiet in the middle of the woods. So we were talking, we figured, we just startled the deer. They booked off, no big deal. And then we heard a loud thud. Just, when you take a big branch and you smack it against a tree, it was just an enormous echo through these woods, and it overpowered all of our voices to the point of where we froze. We all heard it simultaneously. There wasn't like someone, made it up. It was just boom. All of us stopped right then and there. We heard the thuds, like, wow, that was crazy. And the first thought that came to my mind was maybe a tree fell. It happens. You're in the woods, and it was a little bit closer to getting towards the end of summer into fall. So, trees could be dying, there could have been a tree that was just dying and the branch that was laying on just broke and it finally fell the whole way and made a thud. There's a whole various amount of things that could have happened. But just the fact that at that point in time, being as dark as it was, no visual confirmation, we all just froze. And so we kind of collected ourselves a little bit and decided, let's go investigate it. Why not? That's kind of why we're here, to see what's going on. And we go, and we're walking, we couldn't find a single thing. Just nothing. Just no tree that fell, no signs of trees falling, nothing. And then we hear the thud, I want to say at least 15 minutes later again. And we're like, and it was still ahead of us. And I was like, wow, what is going on? And so we kind of just hunkered down a little bit, started to just get some of our gear ready. We got the camera started up. The one friend of mine, he had some sound equipment that he had to pick up certain sound waves that were supposedly be able to pick up on ghost activity, but we wanted to use it to kind of help pinpoint exactly where these sounds are coming from. And then we heard a thud again and again and again, almost in a repetition. It wasn't like, right away, like thud, 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 thud. It was just a thud. A minute or two would pass. Thud. Another minute or two would pass. Thud. And it would go on. I think it went on for at least 30 seconds. Or 30 minutes. And we're like, what is going on? This is blowing my mind. And the first thing I thought of after, the repetitive thuds was, this got to be a Bigfoot. There's no other creature that I know that uses, large branches to smack against trees to ward off any possible threats in its territory. It's kind of like a warning sign for Bigfoots. So I instantly decided that we are not properly prepared for this scenario. We had to back out. It's like we're either entering something that we're not supposed to be entering. If this is a Bigfoot sighting, it's the last thing I want to startle. And so I'm trying to convince everybody. I'm like, listen, let's smooth out of here. We'll investigate all of this in the morning, see if we can pick up any signs in the morning. They're like, no, if he's this close, we're going to try to get him on camera. And I was like, all right, let's go. Less of the saner minds prevailed apparently that night. So we're going in further, trying to figure out where the stud's coming from. And so we would walk maybe a good, I want to say at least good 10 feet and then stop and listen for maybe a minute, walk another couple feet, stop and listen. And we would do that over and over until we would, feel like we're getting closer or something like that. And we got into this little bit of an opening of break of the woods and everything like that. And we find all of this shattered debris of like tree trunks and rocks turned over, and it looked like a giant nest, if you will. And being at nighttime, couldn't really confirm it, but to our eyes at that point in time, night kind of playing tricks on us, it to us looked like a huge nest. And my buddy's recording it and everything like that. He's looking around to see if there's any kind of distinctive signs or hairs or anything that we could use. And of course, nothing at that point in time. And then we heard rustling in the bushes, not even like 2 feet away from us. And he pointed up with the camera. He said, I see it, real loud. He started shouting. He's like, I see it. He's right here. He's right here. And we hear this dashing through the woods, just punching trees and limbs, and just bolts off. And so we gathered around the camera, and you didn't really, seems how it wasn't technically a night vision camera. Again, it was used for ghost hunting. We didn't have the night vision hooked up to it. We had pretty much it used for sound distinctions and so on and so forth for supernatural ghost hunting and stuff like that. But you did see this huge object just dip out within 2 steps. What seemed like it was 2 feet away from us could have been maybe 5 feet away. And it had to have stood at least 7 foot tall, far taller than any other object. The person that could have been in that woods with us, aside from the fact that we were almost in the middle of nowhere, and being at, 12:30, almost 1 o'clock in the morning, there should have been no one else out in those woods with us. And it just dipped off within 2 steps. It was gone. No other traces of it whatsoever. we tried to follow the trail. It went cold after it went across this river little creek that was just at the bottom of the valley, and that was pretty much my experience. I mean, there wasn't anything definite. It looked like something just dipped right out of the corner of the camera's view and then bolted off. We tried chasing it. The only thing that we really had was, the thuds, which, as a skeptic, trees could have been falling. That's as far as you can really get with that. So, I mean, it was a heart-pounding experience to have that, huge creature being that close to us with an immense force of being able to just pick us up and throw us if really needed. So it was exciting, but it wasn't definite enough for us to be like, hey, we got Bigfoot on camera. So it's just kind of been that thing where it's that close encounter.
Boy, that's intense.
It was a thrilling night. It's a night that I will never forget. It was what started off to be just a simple little ghost adventure, bunch of guys just hanging out, having a good time, turned out to be, one of the most, intense Bigfoot sightings that I have ever experienced in my entire life. I mean, it was beautiful, to say the least, just to know in my heart, I mean, against the skeptics and the believers and stuff like that, in my heart to know the fact that a creature like this, possibly exists. It was great. I loved it.
Wow. Well, was this recent, or was this a couple of years ago, or?
I want to say this was at least, Katrina's 5 now, so at least 5 years now, because I was with my ex at the time, and she didn't like the fact that I used to go paranormal hunting and stuff like that. But, decided I needed a time out with some of the friends, and we went out for just one night, and this happened. We went, we decided that we were going to try to head down towards Pittsburgh some, but my friend said that he got an inside tip down in this, Timbuktu of nowhere. He's like, let's go here. He's like, I got the directions right here. Let's go. I took a nap on the way there, figuring if we're going to be out all night, I'm not trying to be tired, wandering in the middle of nowhere. So that way, if I sit down, I don't fall asleep. But,
right.
Yeah, it was, truthfully, it was just, it was amazing. It could be, the only sighting that I can honestly ever have of any other paranormal experience, which I have kind of a few of them, but, we'll stick to Bigfoot, I guess, if you want to right now. But, this...
So, can I read what psychosis is?
Oh, here we go. And we're going to go into a cynical form of all of this. Go ahead.
Psychosis is a condition of the mind where the affected individual has difficulty interpreting what is reality and what is not. There are many causes of psychosis, such as mental illness, bipolar disorders, schizophrenia, sleep deprivation, some medical conditions, delirium, and side effects of certain medications or substances, such as alcohol or recreational drug use. Experts believe that neurotransmitters, dopamine, plays a role in psychosis. Diagnosis of psychosis requires the exclusion of biological causes such as brain tumors, central nervous system disease, toxins, substance abuse, and other health issues. Psychosis is not a diagnosis alone. Psychosis is considered a symptom of a diagnosis from other diagnoses. Just throwing that out there.
So, Uncle Bro, she's pretty much calling us crazy. That's where she's going with that.
I'm not calling you crazy.
I would say, look, I think it's hard. It's hard to believe. I mean, even for a hardcore believer like us, we still have a cynic version. I mean, as you described it, it could have just been some big football player looking person just off on the side of the road somewhere, And for me, it could have just been just
image in our head that we could have saw. We could have just fabricated it into our minds, and it just happened to work out like that. There could have been truthfully, it could have been a deer that just pranced, and it made it look how the camera angle was hanging. It could have looked like it was 7 foot tall. There's a lot of different things that it truly could be. And, as a cynic, I want to believe that there's a rational explanation behind all of it. All the experiences that I had in the paranormal aspect, I want to believe that none of them truly are a paranormal aspect, that it was, as, Sis would say, a certain sense of psychosis, of just fabrication of the mind. But as a hardcore believer that I am, I want to actively believe that the encounters that I did have of all various amounts of paranormal activity, that there is things out in the world that science has yet to catch up to completely understand, or have yet to develop and, actually record. There's millions and millions and millions, or I can't say millions and millions, but, there's miles upon miles of ocean that has yet to be discovered, and we're discovering new types of fish and algae and plant life within the ocean. And though that most of the world on its land surface has been discovered, there's, you go into the tropical rainforest, there are plants and insects and even some sorts of smaller animals that have yet to been registered into the database as well. That's still being discovered to this day. It is, as hard as it is to believe that a creature of this size and, ferocity and variety, especially within the Appalachian Mountain region, being a somewhat urban area as well, no one has found a way of acquiring definite answers. And as a cynic point of view, there has to be a rational explanation behind it, because no one else has seen it. No one else has a definite answer of that was a Bigfoot. That was a cryptid of some sort. There's no hardcore evidence to prove on the contrary that, it was one of these creatures, or that it wasn't one of these creatures.
Thank you so much for being a follower. Feel free to like us and follow us on our channel. This is a really great idea to just pop out, and it's wonderful that we kind of just come together, and we thank you for listening to us.